Hello, viewers and listeners. Welcome back to another episode of Slaves to the Algo. I'm Suresh Shankar, founder and CEO of Crayon Data, an AI and big data startup, a podcaster, and host of this podcast, Slaves to the Algo. That's right, Slaves to the Algo. Why? Because algos are taking over our lives. Algorithms and data seem to rule everything. Slaves to the Algo is an attempt to demystify this age by sharing my learnings and those of leading professionals in their fields to understand how they are using and being used by algorithms in their daily and in their business lives. Over the past few episodes and seasons, we witnessed how data and AI has taken over the world of sports, of healthcare, government, education, marketing, travel. What continues to amaze me is that even the biggest thing that we do, where we spend our time today, which is the world of media and content, is completely being influenced by developments in data and AI. Not all of that future is dystopian, not all of it is utopian, but I do think that we would all be better served if we understand how data and algorithms are actually running our lives today. The media landscape, right from content curation to editing to matching the right content to the consumer to targeting people, is completely being changed by the use of data and AI. And to talk us through some of these changes and how, in fact, it is the age of the algorithm, we have today a media and advertising wizard with over 25 years of experience. Welcome to the show, Srini. Srini is an ex-colleague. He's had a very distinguished career for well over, close to 3 decades in media. He pretty much created the media buying revolution with his first job, which was in a small agency then called Fulcrum, which is now, I think, the forerunner of the entire media buying industry. And from there, he's gone on to multiple bigger and assignments in various companies like Madison, Group M, the Publicis Group, etc. But now he sits the pinnacle of the Indian media landscape as the chairman of WPP, which is clearly the big daddy of the advertising and media industry in India and globally. So welcome to the show, Srini, and thank you for being on this podcast.
Thanks for having me, Suresh. Great to be meeting you after ages.
Srini, I think one of the things that, even in the career when we work together, you've always been both a numbers guy and a creative person, and it's a very funny thing because you came up through the media world where people have traditionally been all about the numbers and what the data shows. But you've also, I think, as a person, been somebody who's been profoundly creative and innovative in the way you approach it in many of the transformations you've driven. But before we go into that, I think I have a more personal question for you. Could you give us one example of an algorithm that that kind of affected you either in your business or as a personal life, beyond all these recommendations engines that the Amazons and all that do, and you said, wow, I didn't know the data could do that. Any example like that you can share?
Yeah, maybe I can talk about the world of music and the fact that I guess most of us are music buffs in some way or the other, and all grown up listening to all kinds of music, right? But off late, Suresh, I also tried to learn playing the tabla. It's always been a childhood kind of a dream to one day be able to play the percussionist, I guess. So I actually went and did it the traditional way. I went to a school some years back. In fact, interestingly, I kicked my job, joined a tabla school, and for 1 year I just learned the tabla. I was so passionate about it. And then, of course, I got back into the corporate world. I didn't really have a regular teacher, but I still did have a few of the gurus coming home every now and then. And then, of course, once I got really back into the thick of things, there was no time, right, for tabla or practice or for the gurujis coming home. But thanks to COVID, a couple of years ago, all of us locked down at home, I kind of rediscovered the passion. And thanks to YouTube to start with, and then a host of other apps, I started learning or rather relearning the tabla. So in fact, nowadays what I do, Suresh, is of course listen to music through various streaming platforms. But every week I try and pick a song or a tune, which by end of the week, in my mind at least, I need to kind of rehearse and memorize the tabla beats. And all the weekend, it's a major project for me. I play the tabla to that particular tune or song. And in tabla, there's a system of tals, which is a system of beats. So I think the first thing is to figure out which tal is a particular tune or song set to. And in most cases, that's the part I'll come to. In most cases, you just figure it out yourself, and then you create that whole piece. And then, I mean, I'm not too much into social media at this age, but I share it with a few close friends every weekend, and I get their feedback. One of the things I wish there was an algo, maybe there is and I haven't discovered it as yet, is if I play a tune or a song, feed it into this machine, it should give me the tal immediately and say, this is the tal. And beyond that, also say, by the way, if it's Kerwa tal or Teen tal or Dadra tal, each of these tals also have a lot of variation. And different Hindi songs use different variations of the tal.
So it's very interesting. Yeah. I'm surprised there isn't an app that does that, because Shazam does that while telling you the song.
Yeah.
It's very easy for every song to know the attributes like the tal and the beat and the whatever else there is. You can find it out. So maybe there's an idea in it out there for some startup guy to go out there and create this.
And I think it's also a great example of human beings and AI collaborating, right? Because there are people I follow who actually are kind enough to tell you what the tal and rag of a particular song are. So you kind of take a little bit from there, and then you kind of try it out. So yeah, so that's, I guess, something which keeps me going, frankly.
And I'm sure. And are you kind of a person, just sticking on that topic of the tabla and the tal, are you the kind of person who gets drawn to certain beats and certain tals, and that's what you keep doing? Or are you does the algorithm of the tal point you towards a filter bubble where it's the same thing, or is it open a wider world of discovery?
It's strange, Suresh. I think I would put it down to the mood, actually. There are a couple of tals which, at least for me, are easier than the others. And they're also more popular, especially amongst Hindi film songs. Kerwa tal, for example, is probably the most popular tal. And I'm a crazy R.D. Burman, Kishore Kumar fan. So a lot of those songs, for example, are set to this tal. So it depends on the mood. So if it's something which I really want to do and feel nice and happy about and share with a few close friends, I pick a song from there. And some of the tals are a little bit more classical. A Rupak tal, for example, some of the songs of the movie Abhiman, you may remember, the lovely numbers are set to this tal. They're a little bit more classical. So I reserve those for moments or days or periods where, I feel like I really need to get into the zone, learn something, feel a bit accomplished at the end of the day and try it out.
And it's so interesting you talk about it, because it's such a different take. We all talk about the Spotify playlist and the Netflix recommendation, but in essence, that's what they're trying to do, right? I mean, we all know the mood, the emotion that the music evokes in us, but the emotion is based on certain pretty much scientific things. I mean, math and music are very closely related, right? And that creates that emotion. So in some way, you're actually saying what it is, that there is an underlying symmetry and a data set and a mathematics to music, which is what drives our emotion. And there's a lot of interesting work going, but I think there's somebody out there who's going to create the thing that can deconstruct the tal for you. But Srini, quickly moving on, I think, into the creative world that you are in, you've seen a tremendous amount of change in the last 25 odd years, right? But right from when there were only two things, right from when India used to watch the Mahabharata at 10 o'clock and 90% of India were sitting in front of the television, to the satellite TV revolution, to the onset of digital, and now social, and then that's taking over. And somehow, somewhere, the advertising industry has kind of literally been taken over by the Facebooks and the Googles of the world, right? Which account for most of that. It's something that was coming. It was visible 8-10 years ago, but most people sat like with an ostrich and didn't notice it. And you now lead WPP. And there's a whole bunch of transformations that are happening. Could you walk us through how you see that landscape and what are the transformations of how, not just advertising, but I think how data and AI are completely changing the way, I think, brands and agencies are looking at the business?
Right. Yeah, all very valid points, Suresh. I think, being a good media guy at heart, let me first start with some numbers just to put things in perspective. And I'm quoting from the recent Group MTY report, the annual forecast that we put out on media spends and how each medium is doing, etc. Now, for the year 2022, that is the current calendar year, digital is expected to be the number one medium in India in terms of ad spend. Finally, the day has dawned, Suresh, where digital has overtaken TV. So 45% of the total ad spend in India is going to be on digital media in the year 2022. followed by TV, which is a shade less than 40%, or 39 odd. So digital and TV together is 85%. Now, interestingly, if you look at the global, number, digital plus TV globally is also 85%. Except that the interplay between digital and TV is obviously different. Globally, it's more like 66% digital, and a little less than 20% on TV. India, it's still a little bit more even in that sense. So only 15% going to the other media. And the massive growths have actually come in the last few years. And in fact, the last 2 years post-COVID, the numbers or the spends on digital have really shot up. And I mean, reasons are obvious, right? I mean, cheaper data prices, people spending more time at home, video taking off in a big way, so on and so forth. So I think the fundamental change in our business is that, earlier we were, as agencies, as organizations, we were, I would say, managers of throughput largely, just managing, let's say, the flow between the medium and the consumer, creating the messaging, doing the media planning, et cetera, et cetera. I think today we have an opportunity to play a far more meaningful role in our clients' business because of all of this disruption and chaos that is happening outside. And today, as long as you make the right investments in data, in technology, and most importantly in talent, you can kind of, I would say, thrive in this chaos. Maybe we'll talk about it a little later in the conversation, but there are several examples where we've been able to kind of move up the value chain, so to speak. Given what's happening around us.
And it's interesting you're saying, for the first time, digital's overtaken television in India, and that's a big moment. But it's still 85%. So, are you seeing TV also growing with this thing because the Indian economy is growing, or is it just like digital is like TV is flat or dropping, and like digital is like kind of every year taking another 10% of market share from the television pie?
Yeah, I would say India is one of the few markets where TV is still a very resilient kind of a business and a medium. And we all know the big TV properties that even today are massive draws for consumers, for advertisers. And given just the complexity of the market, the number of languages, the socioeconomic stratification, etc., for some time to come, TV is going to remain an important medium. Which is why.
How much of that TV has shifted to this? To watching on a device as opposed to the conventional, I watch it on a TV set in the living room?
Yeah, so I would say in the recent past, with video taking off in a big way, a lot of the, I wouldn't say a lot of the shift, but I think in certain demographics, definitely a massive shift has happened to viewing it on screens. I mean, it's not just the younger audience who, for example, watch even some of the big cricketing tournaments on the small screen. But even people across demographics who may never have had a TV, or straight away going to the mobile phone and watching it for entertainment, news, whatever else. So there are these cohorts which are emerging, which are perhaps consuming more of all of this on mobile versus television. But if you step back and kind of average it out across the whole segment or the whole population, TV still commands a decent share. So it's obviously studies in the last many years that have been done, when there are these debates on digital versus TV, is, it's really a combination of the medium, and it's a judicious mix that I guess is needed even today in a brand like India. And I'm sure you know this, Suresh. Very interestingly, if you look at the big spenders on TV in the last few years, they've been the tech brands.
Absolutely.
They've been the tech brands. They've been, in fact, right now it's gaming, it's fintech,
crypto,
crypto, and all of that, which are spending on TV. And I mean, somebody sitting outside will say, I mean, this is going against the grain. What are these guys doing on such a mass?
And that is exactly my question to you. I mean, why are these brands on television? I mean, if you're on tech, why are you not on your device?
So even today, I mean, if you really have to create an impact in a short span of time, across India, which is what most of these brands, companies are trying to do, television is the one which kind of delivers that impact fastest. So especially if you're, I guess, an evaluation game and you want to really make a mark, it's a medium you kind of can't do without. Of course, you need to have a certain amount of scale and budget for that, but I guess most of these players have that.
And that brings me to I think the role of what I think 25 years ago you would do and I would be doing, which is the way media is being planned, right? It was very easy when you had to go and you had 10 things to choose from. But now when you've got literally I think a couple of different things, right? One is digital itself is like, completely there are millions of places. On television, you have like, hundreds of channels and spots and so on. And then you have so many other medium coming up. How is the role of the media person changing in this whole thing from terms of planning and doing that? I mean, what's a day look like? I mean, we always use data, but I remember doing it on paper 30 years ago, and then it was a little bit of super Midas and a computer algorithm. So what's the day in the life of that looking, right? I mean, are they kind of surrendering to the algorithm and letting that do it and focusing on other things, or are they actually still shaping the way money is being spent?
So, okay, maybe I'll answer it in two parts, Suresh. Maybe I'll first talk a bit more about the macro, let's say, advertising or marketing services landscape, how that has got disrupted, or the other way of looking at it is what are the opportunities. And then I'll probably drill down a little more into specifically around media, etc. Now, again, I mean, looking at numbers, if you look at projections from different sources on the marketing services landscape in general, which are the different parts that are growing. E-commerce, if you look at it as a area where we as agencies could play a role, and definitely we have to, given the way it's taking off. That the projections that it'll grow at a CAGR of around 30% over the next 4 to 5 years, maybe by 2025, 26. If you look at marketing technology or technology-led kind of assignments and consulting, again, projections say that it will grow anywhere between maybe 40 and 50% in the next 4 to 5 years as a service or as an opportunity. If you look at experience and all experience management, customer experience, brand experience, and all the services that you can kind of bring to the table there, again, very high growth projected over the next 4 or 5 years. Now, as against that, if you look at the traditional advertising service, which all of us have kind of grown up doing, the CAGRs are in like low single digits for the next 4 or 5 years. So very clearly, for anyone who wants to be in the agency business today, and if you want to kind of grow your business, the areas to focus on are commerce, technology consulting, and experience or experience management. These really are the growth drivers and are the ones which will contribute a significant portion of your revenue if you're still in business in the next 5 years. While on the other, I'm not saying the other side is not important, the advertising, the creative product, the media product, PR and branding and all of that, absolutely important even today, and we just spoke about it. But there it's all about transformation. There it's all about how to use technology, AI, ML, and everything else to ensure that you have a service or a product which is more contemporary. So in a nutshell, what the agency really needs to do is to figure out how to be a startup and grow in areas like commerce, technology, and experience. And on the other side, wear your traditional hat and say, how do I kind of reinvent the old stuff that I'm doing, and the areas we obviously spoke about. So that's what's happening at a macro level as a marketing services industry. Now, coming down to media specifically, we again spoke about how the media mix has changed globally and even in India. And even if you look at within the digital advertising pie, programmatic advertising is about 35 to 40% in our estimate, and again growing kind of year after year. And with the kind of challenges you're facing on the data side, again maybe we'll talk about it later. The need for media planners, buyers to be firstly a lot more creative with data, a lot more knowledgeable about what kind of data stacks to kind of leverage, how do you enrich data stacks, and how do you kind of use that to drive personalization at scale. Being a media person. So gone are the days of and these will sound familiar maybe. You have these 4-5 massive media partners, and you do these 4-5 annual deals for the year, and you're covered, right? I mean, today it's like almost on a daily basis. You're kind of course, a lot of it is being done by the algos, but you're optimizing, re-optimizing, pinpointing, and working with host of partners. Not just media partners are there, but data partners, tech partners, content partners. And the ecosystem has got therefore a lot broader, and your job involves creativity and data going hand in hand to kind of deliver this.
And that's a question I wanted to absolutely get to, because you come to the crux of it, right? You started off as a media person, now you're head of WPP. Yeah. Media is a big part of it, but obviously there's the creative agencies that are doing this, right? how are the creative people, kind of doing it in this age when everything seems to be a small snippet or a little widget that's happening? When you're telling them data shows this, how are creative people, reacting to this whole thing, and how is that changing the way in which brands are being built?
Yeah, I guess all folks today understand that as agencies we have, firstly, we sit in a very very unique position, right? We sit at the confluence of brand, consumer, media, technology. It's all happening around us, and we pretty much sit at the center. And I think what we have going for us, firstly, are the long-standing client relationships that we have. The fact that we understand brands and consumers, we believe, better than most other partners. And obviously the creative strengths, etc., that we have. Now if you look at marketing, again I'm taking a step back just to make a point, Suresh. If you look at the marketing budgets today, and you could see this in the Gartner report for 2021, in terms of the CMO spend summary. Technology today accounts for the maximum chunk of any marketer's budget. I mean, this is a global number, 26 odd percent. And the
Yep.
amount they spend through agencies is actually the lowest number. It's about 23 odd percent. And what's in between is obviously the amount they spend on the, their own talent and so on and so forth. But technology is already the biggest chunk of their budget. Now, if you see across the board, of course, it started with categories like maybe financial services, auto, which were more data savvy, which made early investments in digital, and who were also more performance kind of oriented, to kind of start in a way moving more towards performance driven creative and performance driven kind of advertising. But now FMCG players, once digital acquired a certain amount of scale, and once video and vernacular and everything else started taking off, metrics started falling in place, and slowly they started shedding some of the mental models and have embraced digital as well. So, and of course, in their own way, it brings in a lot of innovation as well, apart from driving more bottom of the funnel kind of metrics. So today, if you're whether you're in the creative department or a PR company or a branding company, you can't escape from the fact that there is technology all around you, which is making it easier for the consumer, first of all, to kind of consume your brand, consume your messaging, consume your storytelling. It's making it easier for the brands and products to kind of reach out to kind of diverse audiences. So I guess it's how do you kind of use all of these as enablers to kind of sharpen your art, and how do you kind of complement all of these?
Are there any examples, senior brands, that have done this whole fusion of the creativity, the art side, and the actual data side? Anything that you guys have?
There are lots of examples, but one very recent example is, of course, the Cadbury's. It's not just a Cadbury's ad campaign. Brilliant work done by Ogilvy and Wavemaker, both WPP agencies in India, collaborating all the way and working with partners, who kind of help kind of stitch all of this kind of together. And here it was, India's number one, you could say, brand ambassador, Shah Rukh Khan, whose kind of video and voice and everything else was used. And using AI and ML, we were able to kind of get down to creating kind of zillions of avatars of Shah Rukh, which the local trade could then kind of leverage to kind of drive local trade promotion. So it was a brilliant campaign with a lot of purpose kind of embedded in it. Of course, the video is there for all to see on YouTube. The case study is explained. But that's a great example of how creativity, data, technology, partnerships, and collaboration at the end of the day, internally and with the client, and of course a very very supportive client who was pushing us to kind of push the envelope all the time. Made this a great example.
Yeah, I don't know whether last year, not this Diwali, but the previous year when you guys ran that ad, I don't know whether you saw the Crayon Data spoof on the ad, where we said, if you use really data, you should use that. That's a separate conversation, but you were going on.
Yeah, no, I'm saying that's an example, and I mean there are, of course, it's inspired a lot of other such work to happen over the last few months, and also if you look at purely in media, and again the conversation we had earlier, right, around using data in a creative way to sometimes target demographics that are otherwise very difficult to reach in India. In India, you have this challenge that it's not just the millennials and so-called tech-savvy audiences you could do fun things with, but you could equally do very interesting work to appeal to demographics who are in media dark markets, perhaps only have a feature phone, not even a proper smartphone, but have a feature phone. And again, the kind of work that Mindshare Fulcrum Suresh has done of late for brands like Lifebuoy is just amazing. I mean, what started off, let's say, a few years ago, where they created like what they call an adaptive data lighthouse. Again, it's a case study widely published, and your viewers could check it out. It also won at Cannes. The adaptive data lighthouse, some years ago was about marrying data from kind of different streams, using modeling, etc., to ensure that these demographics in rural India, get targeted with messaging, with call-ins on feature phones, talking to them about disease and so on and so forth. And from there to today, in the age of AI and bots and all of that, Mindshare Fulcrum, again, working with partners, has created a video bot. There's a video bot as well as a voice bot. And feature phones have also got a little fancier today in India, and some of them have the ability to kind of deliver, this kind of innovation. So today there are doctors in the form of video and voice bots who are kind of through feature phones educating folks who are still in media dark areas, about disease and so on and so forth. So yeah, I mean,
I'm really glad to hear that Fulcrum is still kind of trailblazing. I mean, considering all the things that kind of we were doing in that room or in that building 25 years ago. It's really good to hear that. But Srini, I have a question for you, and I think this is more about, you're the head of WPP. You're sitting in there. The landscape's changing. You just said, like, fundamentally everything's moving under your feet. Digital has already overtaken television. It's probably going to go to 66 like in the other markets. You have a thing where in that digital space, there are now two large players who are dominating that space and who are literally taking over. How do you see an agency business now competing where literally anybody can go there and say, listen, I can go directly onto in these platforms and advertise and so on? Hasn't the data and AI revolution democratized access to all of these platforms and advertising in a way where the agency business is kind of disintermediated?
Yeah, it depends on how you look at it, Suresh. I mean, if we had stayed back in time and said that our job is to make advertising, our job is to kind of deliver that advertising, I think a lot of it, I won't say all of it, but I think a lot of it today could be done by a platform on its own, a publisher, or a bunch of startups, right? Or smaller companies, and we could be totally kind of out of the business. But given the chaos that's happening outside, what we spoke about, the opportunities in commerce, the opportunities in experience in MarTech and so on and so forth, I think, and the fact that we sit at the center, I think the other way of looking at it is to say that we perhaps have the best seat in the house when it comes to guiding the client ecosystem in terms of managing this change. So at WPP, we actually we call it creative transformation. If you really want to transform your business, your brands, your marketing, or whatever else, within WPP, we have all that it takes to kind of drive creative transformation, because we have specialists when it comes to, let's say, data, insights, understanding the consumer and the brand. We've obviously got very, very long-standing relationships and very deep understanding of brands and sectors and so on and so forth, given the portfolio that we kind of manage. The creative expertise that we have in-house, the media expertise, and all the other elements of the marketing value chain. So as long as we are able to do two things, Suresh. One is, I think gone are the days of working in silos. If you're able to kind of integrate your services as much as possible, it doesn't mean you kind of dissolve all these companies and make it one amorphous unit, because that again has its own challenges. Mm-hmm. But we believe we can follow a best of both worlds approach, where on the one hand, you strengthen your operating companies, but then you build client service or client delivery models, which are a lot more integrated. And that's what we've done. In India today, for example, for our top 20 clients, we work in a very, very joined up fashion, and we have a designated WPP client leader for these clients. So
You're
that
sounding more and more like Accenture and IBM, because that's what they do, right? There's a bunch of different people and practices and
yeah, that's the first step. But that's the first step. That's the first step. That's an important first step. That's an important first step because some years ago, even the creative and media won't talk to each other, right?
right.
And then there's a lot of leakage in that sense. But having done that, uh, the opportunities you have to kind of get into more strategic areas. For example, in a particular case, we have developed the entire data strategy for one of our large FMCG clients. And this was done by putting together a team across different opcos of WPP. And we helped the client not just come up with the data strategy, but actually kind of run it to almost transform their marketing now. And we've been doing it for the last year plus. So client building up their first party data stack, we helping kind of enrich that. And then we, building a whole host of use cases. In fact, we started the other way around. We first sat down, identified the use cases so that we're able to make the judicious investments and set the direction. And then, of course, do all the execution that comes downstream, because that's something which anyway we are able to do. So yeah, what you said is absolutely right. This model helps us go towards a consulting plus execution kind of a model, which again is very unique, right? You have people either doing one or the other.
And I'm going to go back to an interesting statistic that I just kind of see, and I've personally seen this, in my own transition from being an agency into first saying, into being an advertising guy to saying data will lead the future. I set up analytics, now I do AI and big data, right? But here's the interesting thing that, it is. The global retail market is 25 trillion. E-commerce is 9 trillion. All the advertising, the global advertising market in the world is 700 billion. Digital is half of that. In a funny way, the whole commerce revolution where a consumer can go directly and buy something has literally, and the fact that access and all that stuff has made it possible for every consumer and every seller to talk to each other, has almost in a way changed the dynamic of advertising, right? And, if you really look at it, how do you see in this new world where there'll be almost direct commerce between any consumer, any product that's going out there still needs to be a medium. I mean, we need to still connect the messaging. Don't you think that the old advertising model is not going to be the the way of the future, when a brand can directly say, I have 100 million consumers, I'm going to talk to them directly on that stuff? What's your take on this? I mean, it's an interesting development.
Yeah, I think like everything else, models evolve and need to evolve with time. I think some elements of the so-called old approach are still there. I think the most importantly, I think the power of the idea or the creative element. I mean, you may talk a lot about data, technology, AI, ML, etc. But even today, it's the power of the idea or the raw creativity that really moves the needle, right? So I mean, that's first and foremost something which we need to kind of recognize and kind of respect. And whatever else we do as an organization, we need to ensure that it only gets strengthened. So I think that's one part. I think the other part is relationships. And I think whether it's the relationships that you build with clients, the relationships you build with partners, how can they get more meaningful? How can they, ensure that, you're able to really collaborate at strategic levels to kind of drive a change and all of that. So I think some of those things.
The relationship between the brand and the consumer itself changing when I can go direct into so many things, right? I don't have to use the traditional mass kind of a thing. I mean, it really depends upon the experience I'm offering. You talked about the Tabla, right? It's about, is there a Shazam-like app which creates an experience and a relationship between me and that?
Yeah. But Suresh, that's while all of those things are enabled today thanks to technology, I think at the end of the day, if you have to run this systematically at scale over a period of time, then you need an organization. You need, firstly some principles and values which you kind of build into the whole thing. You need data insights, and it's not just what the machine churns out, but what people say, thick data in addition to big data, to kind of glean through all of that. And then we spoke about creativity and the power of idea. So there is, I would say, an even more important role that human beings, and by that extension, organizations and agencies can play in this day and age of disruption. Yes, it's changed a lot. For example,
I think that you said it very nicely. I think I caught something out there. So yes, but you need to really orchestrate this whole thing. Is that what the new agency is going to look like? An orchestrator of all of this rather than a provider of a service?
Yes, I think in if you look at, again, going back to the areas of growth, right? Whether it's commerce, whether it's technology consulting, whether it's the whole experience management services, it's bringing, yes, a lot of data, technology, and talent in house. But the issues to contend with for me would be, what is it that you build versus what you buy? The classic build buy question. It'll also be around partnerships. How could you leverage the ecosystem in a more meaningful way to kind of drive that change? And yeah, I think, and then of course talent, both the combination of upskilling existing talent as well as lateral hires. How do you get in people who worked in different industries, people who worked in startups, to kind of come into your organization at different levels and help in a way be the change agents. So I think it's a combination of these which will hopefully make us more effective in our roles. But absolutely, I think we have a great opportunity to play that role, and we're seeing it wherever we've got a more integrated model going. We're seeing strategic value.
Controversial question for you: is WPP India, which you head, ahead of the WPP family globally in terms of the changes you're driving? I'm sure it'll get you into trouble with your boss if you, whichever way you answer.
Well, I guess what I'll be allowed to say to this question, and I'm sure this will get supported, is I think we have a good, I would say, model in India where we obviously adapted the global vision and strategy very effectively in a local market. Because yes, in any global organization, there obviously needs to be a clear vision and strategy which is set at the top. But given that different markets operate quite differently and are at different levels of maturity, etc., it's, I think, at a local level, it's all about how do you translate that into a model that works in market. And yeah, thanks to a fantastic team, a great bunch of colleagues, I think we've been able to develop a model in India that has worked well for us as a group. And yeah, there are 5 areas of focus, Suresh, for us as WPP in India. I think firstly, it's all about client centricity, and I spoke about that, right? How do you build more integrated models for clients so that they see the value of the overall group and not just individual opcos? The second is clearly in the area of tech and data. How do we leverage our strengths as a group? How do we leverage partnerships, etc., and bring in a lot more tech and data into all our companies? Third, of course, very importantly, people and culture. How do we? In fact, we are a market that not only has a chief people officer at WPP, but also a chief culture officer, because we believe a lot of these things are cultural in nature, and we need to bring about kind of cultural change. So that's an area of focus. And then simplifying our structure, given that we have a matrix kind of an organization. How do you kind of bring in more efficiency at the back end? And for example, the campus strategy that we have both in Mumbai and Gurgaon, all WPP opcos now sit under one roof. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and last but not the least, social impact and sustainability is another agenda that we drive as WPP in market. So yeah, I think it's a good model that has been developed, and as they say, there are many more miles to go and a lot more things to be done.
And one last question, Srini, which is really about from the consumer perspective, but also affects your industry. I think there's a growing concern among consumers, obviously, about the way that data is being used. Privacy is becoming important. Regulators are stepping in. But most importantly, one person simply changed the world by just saying that iOS 14 will not allow you to track devices. And we've led to the literally the single biggest drop in market capitalization of any company ever witnessed post that when Facebook announced its results based on Apple's changes. What's your take on that, both from a consumer perspective, which is it good for me, as well as from a business perspective as to what changes as a result of that?
Firstly, Suresh, any simple rule in marketing, which we've always followed, anything that's good for the consumer has to be good for everybody else, the rest of the value chain. So even this particular development and the phasing out of cookies and all of that, and all the privacy debates, I think are extremely good debates, and we see it to be positive development. I have my own personal analogy and personal take, Suresh, if I may be allowed.
Sure.
I always felt that was probably the laziest form, one of the laziest forms of advertising, quite like celebrity advertising. Now that that's out of the way, I think it's time to kind of apply, your left and right brain and do a lot of things to kind of drive more strategic value. And let's talk about 3-4 things that are happening all around us. Firstly, consumers investing time, energy, money, effort to build their own first-party data stacks, right? And I think wherever we've seen that happen, and it's obviously got fast-tracked in the last couple of years, we are actually seeing that activity by itself. This is again the cultural thing. That activity by itself transforming that organization. The organization is able to take a step back, look at the business a lot more holistically, look at everything with a data lens, and make everything very accountable. And I'm not just talking marketing here. I'm talking supply chain. I'm talking just everything else. So that's the first positive development that's come out of this. The second is, again, thanks to AI, utilizing tools like, let's say, conversational AI to get more information about the consumer. And we all know the benefit, right? It's more intent-based data that you get, and it's always kind of going to be a lot richer. The third theme that we're seeing play out is, brand owners increasingly getting conscious of what is the value I'm giving back to my consumer for the data that I'm kind of getting from her, is another positive development. And last but not the least, you obviously have to move away from individual targeting to an extent and look at cohorts and see what you can do with cohorts. Now, if you look at each of these developments, Suresh, there are positives, right? I mean, this whole thing about, for example, conversational AI, we said, is a lot more richer. It's more intent-based data. FPD, we already spoke about. Organizational, cultural kind of benefits. And this whole thing about the value exchange with the consumer just brings in a lot of trust, transparency, openness, especially in this day and age. Very, very important. And targeting of cohorts, again, could lead to more interesting NPD ideas, new product development ideas, which may be difficult if you're just caught up in individual kind of base targeting. So, I mean, there are, like I said, it's an opportunity to kind of reinvent the wheel for an organization, marry left brain, right brain, and most importantly, build a lot more trust with the consumer, which obviously is very, very good for business. So yeah, it's in that sense a positive development and interesting times ahead.
Absolutely. And the one of the people who I've had on my podcast earlier this season, a gentleman called Rishad Tobacawala, used to be very senior in the Publicis group, not the WPP, but he said something very interesting to me, and I really want to end on this one particular thing. He says algorithms look backward, people look forward. And essentially, I guess he's saying when you train an algorithm, you're looking at the data, but the data is always about the past, and it's trying to make a projection. But people have imagination which looks forward. Sitting as you are in WPP, coming as a media person, I just want your take on this whole thing of looking back and looking forward, the use of data and the use of your imagination. Any closing comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think it's not one versus the other at the end of the day. I think it's how do you build effective co-creation models between human beings and AI ML. I mean, there are some things which are absolutely forever, in the human domain, right? Whether it's compassion, emotions, creativity, raw creativity, strategy, empathy, so on and so forth. So, I mean, even if you look at the AI part of marketing or business transformation, whether it's in terms of ensuring you have the right kind of data, whether it's ensuring you have algos that are transparent, that are accountable. It's all done by human beings, right? So at the end of the day, it's like the coder needs an artist to kind of tango at the end of the day. Otherwise, there's only that much the coder will end up being able to achieve.
That's a lovely way to end it. The coder meets the artist, and I guess that's what you're trying to drive in WPP. I know it's you are sitting at the pinnacle of the Indian media and advertising landscape at a very, very interesting time, and there's so much change. More power to your elbow, because I think you are, in my own working with you, I think you've always been able to straddle that media plus creativity conundrum, if you will. So, Srini, I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think we could talk for hours more on what's been happening and what will happen in the industry. But thank you very much for being on the show. It was a pleasure having you to share how I think you're driving the change and where you see the future going for advertising and media with the use of data. Thank you once again for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Suresh. Look forward to catching up in person soon. Bye.
Yeah. My viewers and listeners, thank you for listening to us today. Slaves to the Algo is available on YouTube, Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts, but we don't endorse Joe Rogan. We release a new episode every week, sometimes more frequently. If you like this episode, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. And remember to mask up and stay safe. In spite of all that, COVID is still not fully behind us. Most importantly, stay relevant in the age of AI. Learn to tap the power of the data, but learn also how to harness the power of human emotion, as our guests pointed out so well today. See you all next week. Thank you.